Hello everyone, thank you so much for listening to this solo episode. It's been a while since I, Mannah, have done one of those, and it's not gonna be a walkthrough of a book, which I've done in the past. This is just gonna be a little bit of a monologue, because I feel it is a time to check in. It's a time of great transition. That is really what the astrology is saying. That is my own sense. And of course, in a way, when you are in therapy yourself, you feel like you are in transition, right? That because there's this psychological transformation, hopefully continuing to unfold. If not, you should change your therapist. I mean, that's mostly the sense, at least for me, when I'm in therapy, which I am, and it's the sense of my clients. However, the collective state that I'm talking about when I say that we're on this precipice of transitioning, just before, like on the words, just before this great transformation, then I am talking about the collective state, and I'm talking about the idea of how the microcosmos is reflecting the macrocosmos. So we can imagine that we as individuals, the work that we do on ourselves, it's paying off reflected in the global state of affairs. And of course, when you focus on the news and everything that's wrong with the world, then it's also the darkness, and it's all the people who don't go to therapy and who think, well, it's too expensive, it's not worth it, who's not really into this more sustainable way of thinking, where you would invest in yourself, in your soul, in your psyche, because you realize actually how powerful you are. Well, then we have wars. That's the result. That's my honest opinion. If more people were into therapy, into shadow work, into looking closely, examining themselves, it would not be like that. That's my perception. And I think you might tend to agree, because you are listening to this nerdy podcaster like myself. I think you might have similar views on this, and I do think that you in particular are on the precipice of a huge evolution, because you do show up for yourself. And even though I'm sure you also see many people lagging behind, you're onto something, right? It's not like, oh, the world is now just ending because of all of these idiots. No, something is going to unfold, and we're not just going to be destroyed. I mean, that's kind of what the media is telling us, isn't it? I don't know where you are, what you're listening to. I'm trying not to listen to all of that, but every time something gets through to me, it's based on fear is what it is. Now, the way to ensure that your growth is in the most beneficial direction, it is to do shadow work. It is to closely examine yourself. And again, I'm confident that you do, because you're right here. But you do, and you do belong to a minority. I speak to other podcasters like myself, and they feel the same as me. Sometimes we can think, does it even matter? All the gold, all the wisdom that we interview other people about and share, is it even worth it? Because so few are listening to it. But I hold myself to this idea that I'm living my purpose, right? And so it cannot fail. And if it's not for the current living people, it can be for the ones who come after. And if the internet doesn't last, if podcast, in particular my podcast, is not going to be available to people in the future, I mean, it makes no difference to me right now, because this is my service. This is what I show up for, and I cannot worry any longer, parenthesis, any longer, because I have, how it will reach people. I'm doing what I'm called to do, and the rest is just not up to me. I resist being on social media anymore. So I do not play by the current rules of how to get things out there. This podcast's essence is against the mainstream. So I'm not going to play by those rules. And even if I wanted to, I don't think I could, because my vibe is so different. Now, while I'm sharing all of this about the podcast, I mean, it's kind of less relevant to you. I guess it's just to say thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Now, this chapter, I thought I'd tell you about kind of when I discovered I wanted to be a therapist, right? And I'll tell you about the model of NARM. That's my foundational view. It's my foundations. It's what I work from, and then I add other different therapeutic schools, traditions, but that's kind of foundational way of working with people because it makes so much sense to me, and I'll tell you a little bit about why that is and what it is. Now, when did I know I was going to be a therapist? In a way, always, right? Because when you go back in time, I guess you can see whatever you want to see. But from one perspective, I can definitely see how I always wanted the deep conversations with people that's other kids. I mean, but they were people, just other people my age. Not necessarily as the listener, though. I think that probably appeared because I was mostly in a very dissociated state, but I have memories of wanting that deeper share, wanting to share myself and wanting my peers to open up. Now, adults around me did use me as, I guess, both a mediator, they did that, and also, I don't know, I mean, like a trash can in a way. I always felt that, and that has definitely not spurred me on to wanting to become a therapist. I mean, just for people to just open up their shit. I mean, it was different family members who would just sit next to me and then, I mean, take me aside and just start talking and sharing and crying. And, when they came to the part where I could say something, they kind of just pulled themselves up and no, let's not talk anymore of this. This never happened, and then went on with it. I know it sounds strange, right? I mean, it would have been more normal, I guess, if there was a rape in there or something. But that's another story about the sexual stuff. But just to talk about, I've had family members when I was a child to take me aside to just talk at me. Okay, that's what happened. Just talk at me, cry, I let it all out, and then just end the conversation. I may have asked a question or whatever, but not like receiving any counseling from me, just talking at me. That's what I'm saying. And that surely did not make me want to work with people in that way, just being a place for trash that's, an outlet for other people's shit. I totally hated that. But at the time, I hated myself. I've spoken about this before, right? I hated myself partly because I felt, well, that's probably appropriate. I'm good. It doesn't matter. It's just me. Just let it out. I felt like a trash can. Who cares about me, right? And now, so as an adult, again, that's not what's taken me to this field, but I have felt the pull, the Plutonian, Scorpionian pull to become a psychotherapist for so long. Because I'm not entirely sure. I've just felt I want to go deep. That's what I want to do. So it's two different things, right? I want to go deep, but then there's the whole thing where people just put it all on me. I don't want that. And this is this is leading up to a really important point that I have about what I really felt like I wanted to share with you. It's a critical turning point in my view of understanding working with people. So I hope you're going to stay for the point, okay? So for many years, I heard the call to study to become a psychotherapist, but I had no money, and it's really expensive, at least where I am. So I couldn't, and I wanted to, and then in 2020, I finally did. I still didn't have money, but I made this exchange with a therapist school where I was going to do, I did some podcast work for them, and then I would get the education. But it was the complete wrong match for me. I became triggered a lot because I did not resonate. I did not feel the accuracy of what was being taught. And that's, I think, that can stand alone, but also I know that in my own life situation at the time, I was really unsafe. I was really living on nothing, and it was a whole deal with my kids and being very unsafe, and of course experiencing a lot of guilt and pressure from not having a safe space for my children. So all of that came up in the year of 2020, where all our deep traumas came up. So that's definitely an astrological view on what went on there. But so I couldn't complete that training, and then I went on to search for the exact kind of therapy that resonated. I was like, I need to find what's good for me. And I've searched every single page in Denmark with therapeutic schools. I'm telling you, I've really just thoroughly gone through it. And I kept not being able to find what I wanted. And well, then I found the NARM education, and I'll tell you, it's a bit different in every country. I think it's different here than in the US. I'm not sure about other countries, but here it's in Denmark. It's a 2-year training, and it's offered to people who are already psychotherapists and psychologists. But there are also options for people who are social workers and have lesser therapeutic training, like someone like me. So this NARM education, I searched. I read the book. Now there's 2 books, but at the time there's just 1 book, and I read that, and I really felt I need to do this, even though it seems like an unreasonable idea because it's super expensive. It's really expensive. It's like designed to work. I think your work should pay it. I don't know. But at the time, I don't know if I wasn't employed at the time. I was self-employed, and it was not going great with my own business. So it was, objectively kind of a stupid idea, also because it was not going to give me the basic training that I needed to qualify to work in this field, which is what I wanted to do. I know it sounds silly because I didn't even have the training, but I prior to that, I had all the yoga, and I had the coaching, I had the astrology, so I have plenty of work with people. I knew I wanted to work with people in a deeper way, and so I needed the trauma training and the therapy training, of course. Anyway, when you want to work with that here in Denmark, you need a basic psychotherapist training. It's 4 years, and I think there's some structural changes to it now. So 4 to 5 years, it will take you, and it's of course you pay it yourself. The work that the people you work for can pay it. I've never been in that position myself for anyone to pay anything for me, so it's definitely been such a challenge to keep believing, and it's really a Plutonian, Scorpionian, 8th house challenge to keep in I guess investing yourself and opening to absorb into what it is that you really desire, and trust the process. There, I guess the trust is also very much in the Pisces, right? But in order to merge with what you love, and that's a Scorpionian theme, you do need to trust the process, because it's something that's going to make you more powerful. You're not powerful at the moment, and then you find that thing that you desire it so bad, and you just need to surrender into that. And that's basically what I did. I was full of faith. So I've provided through different jobs, of course, and it's not like I've ever felt like, okay, now I just have the money. It was more like, okay, now I have for the down payment, and then I have for the next, and we don't like that. So I managed, and I think that's the trust part, is when there's something that your soul needs to become all that you can be, then it's going to happen, but you need to trust. And this is getting into actually what NARM is all about, which is, well, it is about healing, right? And it is about loosening the identification, loosening the grip around who we take ourselves to be. And I believe, from a spiritual point of view, that then you can attract much more of what you desire when you have loosened that grip. And that's how I feel therapy and spirituality are so interwoven, and they totally need each other. I need both. And I do not subscribe to spiritual teachers who's like, we don't need to go to therapy, we are ready for ascension, or whatever they say. No, I definitely, well, I guess it depends. I shouldn't be talking about on behalf of everyone, but NARM and what the work that I do is directed towards people who have complex trauma. So many people have complex trauma. So you can call it complex PTSD. It's issues that are not all that easy. It's not just one thing. It's like a chronic thing that has been developing, stirring all through childhood, and is now getting in the way as adults. So for that group of people, I definitely don't think you can just say, oh, we're on the spiritual level and now we're ready. No, we need to go deep. We need to do the Plutonian shadow work before we can rise up. So it turned out to not be a very stupid idea, even though objectively it could seem that way, because I have found profound healing through the work of NARM. Profound healing, definitely. And so, but the reason why, I'm still studying to become a psychotherapist is because of that, because I did those 2 years, and then I do need that basic training in order to be hired anywhere and have the correct credentials. You can say that the NARM work was for my own trauma healing, and that's how I took it. Because it's great going to therapy, but for me, reading about it, working with peers, working in that community, going deeper, that's much more healing for me than just seeing a therapist. I needed to know, the field. I needed to go deep within it. And now we're not at that point I was talking about before. It's really close now, okay? So even on that journey to becoming a NARM therapist, I was not sure that I was actually equipped to do therapeutic work, because as a social worker, which I have worked as, I'm still now, but that's another story. At the time, I had done that, and I had been stressed. I had to be sick and take a pause from my work. I had definitely felt a burnout, and I had actually promised myself I'm never going to do social work again. Forget about that promise, because I am now. And it's social work, and it's also volunteer work. It's like, I'm so passionate, I really want to help, and then just bam, just like burn out, right? Now, what I learned now the point is here, okay? The point being, I learned in therapy that I could sort in what people said to me, okay? So I listened to it all, but it's not my task to take it all in, okay? So actually here, maybe you as well, I can definitely use my neurodivergent different kind of attention span or attention type to enhance, to enlarge what is important, what comes from the heart of the client, and let the rest just pass through my system. This is an amazing, life-changing experience once you got it, and I'll try to describe what I mean. It's like you, as a therapist, you allow yourself to listen intently. I mean, as a social worker, it's very different, because the goal is, at least how we work here, the goal is the goal is predefined. First of all, to get a job, to become a better parent, or whatever. And so it's too defined, and it's too controlling a way of working with other people. Now, in a therapeutic setting, you are completely there on representing yourself, your true authentic self. That's what you wanna connect to anyway, and you're there voluntarily. Now, that kind of healing work allows me, the therapeutic work allows me to latch on to the client's heart desire, your heartfulness, and it makes a world of difference, I think. Now, this is one of the components that I learned on the NARM training. And what else? What is NARM, right? I hope this is a big point for you. I mean, maybe you already knew, but for me, it was a complete turning point, where I had just, taken it all in and just listened to all of the ranting and blah, blah, blah. My life sucks, all of that. And just, I can almost see myself just becoming more and more dark, just filled with negative energy. Of course you burn out. Of course you're gonna promise yourself never to do that to yourself again, right? But it's been so complicated for me, because I wanted to help people, but I didn't want to feel those negative, weighing down emotions. And I realized that there's a big part of that has to do with the way that I listened. And now I have learned to listen in a completely different way. And I do feel that my neurodivergent type is helping me do this work, because again, I'm hearing what the client is saying, but I'm only really hearing the important stuff. And so when I have a client talking, I'm there, I'm present, curious, open, but I'm not really interested in anything else than what comes from the heart. Sorry for repeating this, but it's important. Anyway, let me try to describe you a little bit about what NARM is, because this is just like a personal takeaway that I'm sharing right now. But the goal of NARM is to support the client's internal freedom, including the ability to trust yourself, including increased capacity for connection to yourself and to others. In overall terms, we can say that NARM, I think every therapeutic model should have this goal, but well, I'll take it as something that at least is true for NARM. It is to become an expert in your own internal world. I mean, if the goal is not to become an expert in your own internal world, then who's going to be, right? Is the therapist going to be that expert? It's surely not that way. But, for someone like me who's been brought up religiously, this part about being your own expert has definitely lacked. I'm specializing in a field right now that I have needed for myself. That's very classic, right? I've definitely, I am in the category of having complex trauma. More and more it gets resolved, right? But the dynamics are still there. I have adapted to manage the terror of attachment loss. And these attachment issues has limited my life and my perspective. And I have felt disconnected from myself and from others, and feeling a greater internal organization through this therapeutic work, that is just a huge relief. And I definitely feel much more agency today than before. And I guess the self-acceptance has replaced a lot of the shame. The shame is about isolation and like not even being worthy of existence. So I value the connection to myself. And as we've listened to in interviews, we can philosophize, that the connection to yourself, it's always there. So it's always been there, right? Yeah, but at least I've not been aware. Religion, dysfunctional relationship, whatever, has clouded that perspective. And now that longing to connect that I felt before, I've definitely felt loneliness before, longing to connect to others, that's turned around. It's turned around, whereas, finding it within myself, finding that connection within myself, that has a positive effect on my friendship. It's, it deepens your relationships when it's like that. So, okay, let me talk a little bit more about what NARM is. We need to address the psychobiological patterns. Okay, I'll talk more about what that is. The psychobiological patterns, because they are what drives the cognitive and the behavioral symptoms. And that is, of course, what gets in the way of our growth. So what is in the way of real change? You sit there in therapy and you just want to change. Why doesn't it happen? Well, that in NARM, we say that is because you have an unconscious loyalty to not changing. It's trauma-based, it's survival-based, it's these patterns that end up in, they come out as self-sabotage, they come out as unhealthy relationships. And the reason is the neural pathways that were wired into us, or into the children. I'm talking about specific people with complex trauma, right? From the environment. So the environment programs children into being in a certain way, right? Now, as adults, we can counteract that shame and that self-rejection that was programmed into us through heartfulness and through compassion. But then how do we get there? How do we get there, right? Well, it's an emotional work. It really is. I'd say it's a phenomenological and emotional work we do in NARM, because we see emotions as the building blocks of the self. And so a big part of healing is staying connected to the emotions, as well as being able to regulate them. And that is not easy with complex trauma, because it's not easy you're not trained in experiencing a variety of emotions. You've trained yourself to shut off from emotions. You're not able to tolerate feelings, meaning if I ask you, how do you feel? You don't even know. Like, I don't know. I can't feel anything. Are you with me? I definitely have had this. In religion, and that's a very general way of saying it, right? But the inner world, it doesn't matter. All that matters is God. So the inner world doesn't matter. So of course you get completely shut off from your emotions, because you kind of learn that anything that goes on in you is sinful by definition, right? Now, complex trauma shows up in adults in this way, where we don't know what we feel. And we have to remember that in the background of that, I don't know how I feel, there's a fight. It's like the system is fighting to shut down emotions. And it's very draining. So this fight is very draining. So there's this term we say to run from yourself, right? To run away from the emotion. It's really exhausting. And people will be very aware of the symptoms, whatever that is, the symptoms, maybe the depression or the feeling of not being safe or the feeling of being fake. But they're not aware of the authentic emotion behind the symptoms. And that is important. That's important for this healing work because these emotions hold a message. It's a message we need to guide us through life. And again, why don't we just have this normal? Why don't we just let us guide through our emotions? Well, because children, the ones in this group of CPTSD, we got that implicit understanding, we got that implicit teaching from the environment that our emotions were bad, not valid. The emotions are bad, you are bad, and we just deserve the abuse, we deserve the neglect. And I know it can seem a bit much when I talk about it like that. I don't know how I can point to it in your experience, but for me, I can definitely find that embodied experience of what I'm talking about, but not with so much anger. Like the anger you hear now, where I'm talking about it's the abuse, the neglect. This is my adult part looking back. When I was in it, as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, it just showed up like, of course I don't deserve it. Like a thing I said before, like, yeah, you could just tell me anything because, getting a bit of a sense of value from, or even that you want to use me as a trash can, just whatever you want to use me for, that's awesome because I'm nothing. So it shows up in that subtle kind of, personality. It's how I relate to myself. It's just like nothing. It doesn't matter that you're stepping over my boundaries. I don't even feel my boundaries, right? So I hope you can kind of recognize this, even though when I talk about it from this more angry place or observing place, this is what happened. This is the neglect that happened from the environment. Then our child part can maybe have a harder time recognizing it. I don't know how you feel. Let me know on an email. You're very welcome. But so there is a path back into enhancing the capacity for emotions and for emotional expressions. And it's not about just letting it all out, and I've been talking about that. It's about integrating emotions and containing emotions, and that is what is going to give you a greater capacity for creativity and aliveness in your heart. What is blocking the aliveness and the creativity is the adaptive survival strategies. The adaptive survival strategies, these are the patterns, the psychobiological patterns I'm talking about. We develop them as children because as children, we need the relationship to the caregiver. And so on an unconscious level, we shut down authentic part of ourselves. I'm sure you've heard this kind of thinking before. Now it becomes a deep pattern of identity that is still held up by that same really, really young fear of relational loss from childhood. So it's deeply held, this organization of the self, and it's systematic and it creates stress. So in NARM, we say that the personality patterns is actually the nature of our suffering. And this is a perfect match with evolutionary astrology that is seeing the whole chart as your karmic imprint. And it's who you take yourself to be, right? So we cannot, of course, shift that. That's the healing part. But it is helpful to just become aware of how identity reinforce patterns of disconnection. Because that disconnection, it's again distancing yourself from emotions, and also distancing from that communication that is in the emotion, the messages. You're not attuned to that. So that's why it can be so hard to listen to your intuition. Is it the trauma speaking, or is it the intuition? Because we're simply not trained to even be in contact with that message in your own emotions. Now, in NARM, there's different styles of survival strategies, and I'll save that for another chapter. Okay, here I just want to give like an overall impression of what NARM is, but it is a big part of it to understand those different kind of strategies and different kind of child consciousness, because it is really child consciousness that show up in us as adults until we become more disidentified from those strategies. And how do we then disidentify? We disidentify by tolerating and completing unresolved emotions. So we call it emotional completion, and that allows us to soften the identification and deepen into the adults we are today, deepen into adult embodiment. And I believe I have talked about this before somewhere on this podcast, but self-activation, that term is really a part of, the completion, to be able to self-activate. So healing is ultimately about becoming present to your primary emotions. So not just the story around the emotions, not just the symptoms, because that's again just rejecting your true feelings. But when you can relate to yourself, and you can relate to the people around you in the world in a more clear-sighted way, because these emotions are not blocking anymore. They're not stagnant, as you would say in Qigong, anymore. They've been freed up. Then you're more spacious. You're more able to take in joy. You're more able to feel compassion for yourself and others. And there's a therapeutic work there, because we tend to have internal conflicts, right? So there's a therapeutic work there. And I love, of course, this way of working, because my internal resonance as a therapist becomes important in that complexity that we hold for our clients who come with complex trauma. And so my internal resonance is again messages for me to learn from. And the way we do that is keep up the curiosity, being open, and instead of pushing the process, because we can get impatient as therapists, right? We just want to get there. Well, that when we do that, when we push, that's a strategy. I'm talking about the therapist now, but that is a strategy that will show up in a therapist, and ultimately you want to earn love, right? If we want to take it to that, if we want to earn love, I want to fix the client so I am worthy, sort of thing. Doesn't make sense at an adult level, but your child consciousness may show up here. And that's exactly what I am, not doing anymore. That is what I promised myself back then when I said that I'm not doing social work anymore. Actually, that promise is not about doing social work or not, because I'm not sure I'll ever be able to stop that. I'm a Pisces sun. So, but what I wanted to stop with is definitely the pushing, the pressure, because it taps into helplessness. If I cannot change my client, and to be honest, mostly I cannot really change other people, well, then that compassion fatigue tends to show up if my social work is being, if I'm doing it as a strategy, to take care of myself by taking care of other people, right? That is going to bring us into compassion fatigue. Help should come from a place of abundance, I'd say, and not survival. So even though the impulse to help seems really innocent, you're gonna burn out. I burned out in the past as a social worker, not through the NARM approach, because this is different, but just because I thought, helping, that's very generous, so let's do that. But when you can't even fill your own boundaries, you're not listening to your own internal cues, messages, it's really, it's gonna fill you with dark energy to work with people who have problems. So I completely understand now. There's different light now for me to understand the periods of great stress in my life with working with people. And so this therapeutic resonance, felt sense, when you are holding, when you are being present to another person's suffering, that is crucial, essential. To be present in that process of intersubjectivity. You are embodied, and in NARM, just in overall general terms, we say that the internal states to have as a therapist is curiosity, presence, and self-inquiry. Curiosity, presence, and self-inquiry. And I don't know about you, but that is completely in alignment with my values. I am very curious, and the Scorpio, Pluto that we talk about all the time, that is focus. It is being present. It is showing up for life. And the self-inquiry, for sure, that is what I'm doing, all the time. That's what I'm doing all the time. That is what keeps me alive, I think. As soon as I don't do that, some automatic voice from the past is invited to take over. So I keep checking myself. I keep examining myself. That's what I'm talking to you about a lot of the time. So I hope you can see how NARM has resonated for me. And I hope that you are just as excited about your therapeutic background, if you have one, and otherwise just being excited about going to therapy, right? I hope all of you listening, whether you're a therapist or not, that you are taking the time to go through your own process, have your own therapist, and do the work, keep showing up. I mean, I don't think it's easy to find a therapist that you are matched for. It has not been for me. I'm still trying different schools, different therapists, and it's a journey for sure, but every interaction teaches me something. It's not like in the beginning of my journey, I definitely just said, okay, it's a bad therapist, I'm going to choose someone else. I don't do that anymore, and I haven't in recent years, because now I know there's so much to learn from any interaction, and definitely in that kind of setting as well, in a big way, especially when I allow myself to be completely honest and say honestly what I think also about the therapeutic work, which can be vulnerable. Anyway, that's for a whole other chapter. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tapping in with me once in a while, hopefully every single time. Please share this podcast. It is my great passion to reach people in this field of therapeutic astrology and the like. And it is also my great passion to interview people. It just is. Not every person on the globe, I want to interview wise people. That's who I want to interview. That's who I'm called to interview. So hopefully I get to keep up that work, and you can help me by tapping in, by tuning in, and by sharing it with your friends. And I'm not ordering you to be on social media when I'm not. That's a bit hypocrite. But if you're on social media, please share it. If you're not on social media, just send it in a text to a friend, right? That's what I do. People get all these texts from me. Often people block me. So anyway, I hope your friends won't block you, because you'll be doing them a service, right? Sharing this stuff with them. There's someone sitting right here, a little outside of Copenhagen, being so passionate about healing, transforming, understanding the underlying nature of reality, and wherever you are, it's reaching you. That's pretty fantastic, isn't it? Thank you so much for being a part of this, and we'll catch each other real soon.